Welcome to ABA On Call with Rick Kubina and Doug Kostewicz. Explore insightful ABA discussions. Stick around for a chance to earn a CEU. Listen for 3 secret words, note them, and claim your CEU after the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of ABA On Call. Doug, today we're going to talk about something that is controversial from our side of behavior analysis, but not controversial in psychology, and that is the mind.
Right.
And I'd like to start off with, let's just talk about, what is the mind? When we say the mind, what does it mean? I think back to, before we get into a definition, one of the very first Simpson episodes. It was like Simpsons with Tracy Ullman, and Homer Simpson says, "What is the mind? No matter. What is the matter? Never mind." Now I don't know that Homer Simpson came up with that. Maybe he took that from someone else, but it's quite clever, and I think that starts to encapsulate the mind and how it's this nebulous thing. And maybe
Yeah.
you've done some research, maybe you know or have a definition of the mind.
Well, I did a little bit, but yeah, everything that I've been told, many people who get into behavior analysis early in their careers are usually in psychology. And so you'll get different viewpoints and different thoughts. But yeah, the mind is always the other thing. It's the thing behind the curtain that's controlling it all versus the physical stuff, which is the brain or the things we see. It's this other nebulous is a great word, but I always think like it's the what's the guy from Oz, the grand Wizard of Oz that's behind everything that you can't really see. But that was what I thought about with the mind. But yeah, I do have some. I did some research. I did some looking around, and I don't know that I learned anything. I think I became more confused when I was trying to find what the mind was. So
Well,
I could share a little bit.
share with what you come up with, because I came up with some things myself, and I can relate with your being confused, because this is something that, because it's not a real thing, people have attributed all
Yeah.
kinds of things to what the mind is. So what do you got?
So I found something that says we have 4 minds and 3 brains.
Oh, okay. 3
Yeah. So
minds,
there's this,
3 brains, 4
yeah,
minds.
there's the soul mind, then there's the reptilian mind, and then brain, the limbic mind and brain, and the neocortex mind and brain. The second one is the body mind. Third is the emotional mind. The fourth is the rational mind. Then there were 3 phases within that. There's the subconscious, the conscious, the unconscious. And then there's a variety of schools of thought that attribute that there is nothing outside the mind. There is the mind and there's both. So I don't know. You can take for that. I can explain some of it, but yeah, I learned. I feel like I learned less.
Dude, what I've seen, I looked at a couple introductory psychology books. I just Googled the mind. And
Mhm.
what I get from it is there's all these complex behaviors that people do. There's mental processes that occur.
Mhm.
And all of that is attributed to the mind. And of course,
Right.
now we have fancy words for it, cognition. So people now
Mhm.
will still talk about the mind, and it's something that is a causal agent. And we'll talk more about that later. But if we understand, why do people do things, we talk about the mind, and we all have minds.
Right.
There are people that define psychology as the science of behavior and the mind. And there you have it. The mind
Right.
is something that's responsible for all of these different cognitive processes, mental processes, but it doesn't actually exist. It's nowhere.
Yeah, and it's nowhere. And it's so I like how you said it's the causal, but it's also the way, and I like I said, I never heard these terms before, like the soul mind. They're talking about these things even within different phases of life. So you're talking about causal agents for behavior. This is causal agents at different times of your life. In fact, the soul mind is when you're an embryo. I'm like,
Uh,
I don't know how that you collect any type of, I mean, do those kinds of behaviors then. But then it's like as you're learning, they're explaining the mind is shifting as well. So it's this, it's an attempt, I think, to continue to give that causal agent to this notion of mind rather than other aspects of learning. As we learn to do different things and say different things, it's just wanting to always come back to that causal agent of that nebulous mind because, well, we're special because we talk. So then that's it, right?
the mind, if we take the mind as in a part of us as humans, psychology and we're behavior analysis is part of psychology, even though there's a small group of
Mhm.
behavior analysts that say, hey, let's get out of psychology, we're our own thing, leave that argument out of this one. But
Right.
assuming that psychology is a discipline that wants to understand, why do we do what we do? Why do humans
Mhm.
behave? Why do we, when we talk about these complex emotions and feelings and thoughts that we have, like humans can do some very complex things. And psychology is about trying to understand that. And what we have to this very day is we have people that still use the mind. Now, that we're gonna, it's hard not to jump to the problems that this creates, but that's our second
I
segment,
know.
so I'm not gonna go there. But this mind, we need it, like in anything that's involved in science. Whenever you're doing some type of analysis, you have to start with something that is real, something that's physical versus this placeholder, which is what the mind is, as far as I can tell.
Well, that's great. And that placeholder, I think, has roots way early in our as we formation of the science discipline psychology. It's like we gravitated towards this special thing, and that special thing became this nebulous agent. And now everything is leading from that over time. We're still maintaining that, okay, we're doing all this stuff, but invariably it goes back to the mind. It goes back to this. And that's sort of a callback to where it kind of started. And like you said, we have to kind of agree on that. And the problem is, not everybody's agreeing on that, and there's some problems with that. But we kind of gone, don't worry about, don't look over here. We're going to be going over here to do these other things, and that impetus, if you work its way back, that's still the mind.
Yeah. Uh, there was a lot that happened with the information processing revolution. Back in the 50s when people learned about computers, and 60s and 70s, information processing was really big. And then that's where the mind. I won't say it lost it lost its flair, but it did shift to cognition and the cognitive side. People would talk about information processing, and I know like reading is something that I've studied a lot in my life. And there are people that when they try to explain how do we read, there's all these processors and it's all this theoretical stuff. And how do you know that this is real? Well, you run a study, and this study is nothing but an inference to this mind or whatever these processors are
Right,
showing. So that
right.
mind, for people that believe it, they see that there's evidence for it when they do studies, and those studies then can be inferences of this thing called the mind. So, like you're saying, It's been with us for quite some time because as humans, we want to know things. We turn the dial back and we now it might be laughable when we try to understand, like, we didn't know anything. We didn't understand our place in the universe. We thought literally we were the center of the universe. And as we keep learning more and more, we start to lose those fanciful notions that we had from the past.
Yeah.
But still, this is one area in psychology, the mind, that's still going on. And as far as I'm concerned, is still causing problems.
And that is a good segue to our first secret word, and that is spring. So, Rick, tell me, it's going to lead us to some problems. Why is this notion of the mind so problematic?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked that question. We could spend a day talking about this. And
Mhm.
if you are a behavior analyst and you're a fan of science, this is why I personally feel, I'm a scientist first, and I'm a scientist that's interested in behavior. If you're a natural scientist, not any scientist, but a natural scientist, and that's what Skinner was. Skinner looked at behavior very directly, and the mind is something, as I mentioned earlier, you're not looking at directly. And it gets to causality, which you and I were talking about. Why is it that people do what we do? And something that you
Mhm.
learn very early on in behavior analysis is this three-term contingency, which has been expanded to the four-term contingency. But through
Right.
time, these antecedents become these stimulus, these descriptive or discriminative stimuli, and as deltas, and you have a behavior, and then there's a consequence. So these contingencies can explain behavior. You don't need to say, well, it's because I was thinking about it, it's because I was willing it, it's because I made it happen. The mind, my mind is what was part of this causal stream of events. We don't need to deal with any of that. We do away with it completely and just embrace what we can observe. And that is, if you want to have a true science of behavior in psychology, if you want to understand why people do what they do, get rid of these intermediaries because it's not helping you.
Yeah, and it's not just that. There's two fallacies in there, right? You talked about people look at that A, B, C, or three, four term contingency as so simplistic. And
Hmm.
any behavior analyst who spent any time understands that that couldn't be more farther from the truth, right? It is a very complex interaction, taking into account your history reinforcement, your history and situations, certain establishing operations or abolishing operations that are in effect. All of these things, it's very complex. It's just that three term is what we like to use. So that simplistic, but people don't like to attribute simplistic things to people. Now, if you go to this grandiose notion of mind, that differentiates us from the beast, from the animals, from the plant, anything
Yeah.
out there. So it puts us on a pedestal. So if you don't or reject that very difficult notion, and immeasurable, nebulous note, if you reject that, then you're taking away that special place that you talked about earlier. Like, we're no longer the center of the universe. Guess what? We're not even in the center of our solar system, even the center of our Milky Way, which isn't even the
Right.
center of anything. We're just
Yeah.
we're just out here doing things. And so the idea, it we gotta be special. And the problem is it explains nothing, right?
Yeah.
You already said you want to explain behavior. You want to do it in a parsimonious, because you're a natural scientist, a parsimonious way. Look at this. Look at what behavior analysis lays out for you. And we can explain things. Does that mean, remember, we deal in probabilities, we don't deal in absolutes because we can't access everybody's history. We can't access
Yeah.
every little thing, but we deal in probabilities and we deal when we're talking about science. we don't need that nebulous, mystical, immeasurable thing to be special. We don't
Yeah.
need it. It's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. We're fine. We survived without it. So I think that's the holding on to those traditions and trying to find all these different ways to measure it and show that it's there. That's actually holding us back.
Hmm.
That's what's a major problem with that view. It's not helping us move forward as a species and move forward as and understand problematic behaviors, understand behaviors that are harmful to clients, to whatnot. That doesn't help the situation. So I think
Yeah.
that's one of the major problems of holding on to that notion of mind.
Yeah. And everything that you just said, some people who are listening to this conversation, who, if you're listening to this conversation and you are not a behavior analyst, you might see like, wow, these folks don't play nice in the sandbox. This is a fundamental assumption of our science. We reject these uh, entities that are substitutions for something else. When I remember, I'm going to go way back to when I was an undergrad, and I went to a program. I went
Mm-hmm.
to Youngstown State, and it was an eclectic psychology program, which meant one person was the social psych person, one person was a psychoanalysis. Yes, I
Right.
learned about Freud. One person was cognitive, and then we had a couple behavior analysts, actually three of them. And of all those things, I remember when I was learning about behavior analysis, and like they would just talk about these experiments. So you have a dog or a cat, whatever the animal is, and uh, there's the sound of the can opener, and then food is delivered, and then in the future that can opener starts to acquire, the dog's like, oh, here's the can opener, running over to where you are, and receiving food.
Mm-hmm.
All of that could be explained behaviorally, but yet people
Right.
and my fellow classmates were like, oh, well, the dog thinks this and knows, like, willing to say any of that stuff.
No, definitely.
It's not helping, is totally not
No,
helping.
it doesn't. It
And
doesn't
and like
add
you said,
anything.
it just it further distracts us from the true kind of analysis. By saying that we have a mind and
Right.
someone's thinking, you're adding this extra layer of stuff, or if it was processing or it had this cognition, you don't need that to move this wonderful science forward. You just don't need that to
You don't.
understand behavior.
I swear, I think we had the same undergraduate thing. My behavior analysis teacher in undergrad would yell at kids because we were in the rat lab, and the rat knew when they pressed the lever, and they'd say, "You cannot say no. You cannot say no." And so I would tease him as I got older, like, "Oh, I knew to come to ABAI to see you," and he'd laugh because he's like, "No, you can't." So yeah, it's amazing how you get across early in your careers. You're starting that the rejection happens early because it doesn't help.
Yeah.
It it's not necessary. It adds levels of obfuscation that don't help the situation. It's just unnecessary.
Yeah. It doesn't
And
contribute.
just because and this stuff, and we've had our podcasts on private events because that's what next year. Oh, private events, thoughts and feelings. Are you denying? No, I'm not denying that. Their behavior is just like anything else. The self
Yeah.
is a transducer of my own event. There's nothing special about them. They're just, you can't see them and you can't count them. But that doesn't mean they aren't there. Thus, why we deal in probabilities are not absolute. Not everybody can access all aspects of what's going on in the environment at the time. So,
Yeah. And this,
yeah, this is a problem. Go ahead.
yeah, that just brings me back to my comment about behavior analysts not playing nice in the sandbox. Yeah, you can have fundamental disagreements and just don't interpret that as like, yeah, I don't agree with you. If you're in another, if you have another discipline of psychology, I can like you, I can respect you, I can even look at the work that you're doing, and even though you might attribute it to the mind, I'm not going to agree. Like, I can look at your data, and if you discovered something interesting, I could be like, oh, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
you discovered this thing, but I don't have to agree with your analysis that this is why it's happening. We can agree that it did occur. We can even agree that, you and I have talked about this before, and I think we had a whole episode where we talked about um, uh, cognitive bias and no, that's not the term. What was that? Why am I blanking on the term? Cognitive, when you find,
Dissonant?
yeah, thank you, cognitive dissonance. Yes, we can agree that
There you go.
people have this bad feeling when they're confronted with information that doesn't agree with what they had done or thought, but we don't have to say, well, the reason why is because you knew that this thing happened. We don't have to attribute all
Right.
of that to the mind, because it doesn't move psychology
Right.
forward, and it doesn't move forward our understanding of why people do what they do. Well,
Okay. Well,
yeah.
second secret word. The second word is baseball. And now, Rick, what can we impart to behavior analysts as they're confronting some of these things out there? And what are the thoughts here? Because we're I view us. I don't mean behavior analysts. When we're out there, that's common. That's common from other academics. That's common from other professionals. You hear this notion of mind and cognition and etc.
Yeah, we have a lot to offer. I think to address that topic, what we have to understand is, there are two things going on there. One, we've said this before. How do you deal with other professionals that have different views? And the answer is always going to be the same. This isn't some amazing insight. Be professional and be nice to people. Read respectful. That's it. But
Right.
in terms of what we have to offer, we are a descriptive science in the sense that we look for understanding behavior through the lens of what we've seen. You can take
Mm-hmm.
behavior analysis back to 1913 when we look at Watson. Watson had an extreme form of behavior analysis before Skinner came with radical behaviorism. But what Watson did is his brand of psychology was a rejection of the mind and all of these other things that we can't observe. So
Right.
Watson kind of went overboard when he had his great statement like, hey, give me 12 healthy infants and I'll turn one into a doctor, a lawyer, a beggar man, a thief. Those were his
Right.
words. Uh, we don't need to be that extreme, but still, he started this revolution and he had much influence. Pavlov has much
Yeah.
influence. And we can look at what they have to offer in different ways, but radical behaviorism, and even if we fast forward up to now, radical behaviorists aren't the only game in town. The people that listen to us, there could be some interbehaviorists with Cantor. There are other people that look at behavior not necessarily through a verbal behavior lens, but there's other ways of looking at it, and that's all fine. We have this umbrella of behavior analysis, but everything that people are coming up with, at least in terms of behavior analysis, is understanding behavior without these intercessionary types of constructs that people are throwing in. So these highly complex processes that people do, creativity, that's a heck of a thing. But we can go back to our history and look at very simple
Right.
experiments where people were looking at how you have creativity. Now, you might not hold up those basic experiments to explain all of creativity, but it does explain a slice of it, and it does explain part of this very uh, highly human types behaviors that we attribute to humans, that it can be explained behaviorally. It can be explained through
Right.
descriptive science.
You don't need explanatory fictions, right?
Good word.
You don't need to go and have that last step be some nebulous thing. Even though you're doing good stuff all along the way, you don't need to go back to that as the impetus for everything. So
Or for
yeah, that
anything.
I think you got, or for anything. The idea here is look at the here and now. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but that doesn't also mean that you need to, that there's something you can't see going on that's impossible. There may be some aspects that we can't explain right now due to technology, due to private events, due to other things, but don't go to that explanatory fiction. And when you're working with others who want to go there, again, take what you can, again, be respectful and understanding, translate it, and work from within. Understand what they're coming from, translate it back to them, translate in the best interest of the client, the individual you're working with, whatever. That's fine because other people have good ideas. Other people can bring things. That doesn't mean we have to agree with how they explain it, but the implementation of something may be a great thing. So yeah, I think that's what just be on alert for it and be ready to translate it is the way I would say. Translate it to yourself, not back to them, but you can rephrase things. You can focus on outcomes. You can focus on technique, and yeah, do your best to kind of.
Yeah. Well, that's sound advice. The term explanatory fiction is always a good one. And when people advance in explanatory fiction right away, you know that that's not going to be helpful because it's circular reasoning and
No,
it's just going to keep going round and round. And it's not going to
exactly.
get at me. People who, especially in our field in behavior analysis, wherever you're working, the chances are you're looking to solve some kind of problem that deals with behavior. And that problem could be increasing,
Right.
like we had an episode not too long ago where we're talking about OBM. And here you have these businesses where they want to use the science of behavior to increase behaviors, safety behaviors, or decrease behaviors, like people getting hurt, or you're in school, kids saying mean things to each other, hitting each other, whatever that is. And in explanatory fiction and in looking at how we understand why people do what they do, we don't need to add that because ultimately it's not going to help us solve the problem. And we have so many experiments in behavior analysis that uh, have been practical. We have the basic side of our science, we have the applied side of our science. And on the applied side of our science, it's about how do you solve problems, and you do it through description, you do it through understand what are discriminative stimuli, what are consequences, and how does that interact in these contingencies. And if you can just start there, you're going to solve a lot of problems. Maybe not all of them, but a lot of them.
No, well, they say, right? If something explains everything, then it explains nothing,
Yeah, that's a good one.
right?
Yeah,
So, you know, take data. We take data on behaviors, right?
yeah,
Let's go there. The explanation can be right there as well.
yeah.
So,
I do want to point out, as you mentioned this maybe a little bit ago when you were talking about the specialness of people, and there have been several schools of thought in psychology. There have been several different iconic people that have said, this is why people behave. Here's my theory, and they've come and gone. And the mind is still there, and it is, sometimes it might masquerade differently, but I was listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson, who was talking about the specialness of people, and he talked about how uh, how unlikely it is that you actually exist. And he shared this math where he talked about,
no, I know.
yeah, he talked about of all the people that could exist, like just think about how we reproduce. You think about eggs and sperm cells and how many people were not born through all these pairings, but yet you, through some miracle, are here.
Yeah.
And it just,
Yeah.
listening to that, just number one, tells you how incredibly special we are, how amazing it is that we're
Yeah.
here, that we can talk, that we can pursue things like behavior analysis. Whenever I think about uh, what are ways of making you feel special and happy? I think about that. And not only that,
Well, it's better than the mind.
the other thing I think about too, second to that, is where Richard Dawkins and other people have talked about they're Richard Dawkins, famous evolutionary biologist, famous biologists in general. People have obviously not liked the evolution that he talks about, and he'll say, look, when you understand science, just because you understand how a flower blooms or how a rainbow occurs doesn't detract from its beauty of it. And I think the same thing with behavior
Yeah.
analysis. Just because we're understanding why we do things, and we don't have this mind that is making us do these things, but we can understand it, in no way detracts from any relationships we have, the specialness, the richness of being a human. In all of that, we don't need the mind to be special. We don't need the mind to have worth as a human being. We don't need the mind for any of these things. Behavior analysis, where we are and how we're growing, and the more things we learn, I feel being a behavior analysis is still immensely satisfying, and is something that, I'm not going to speak for you, but I probably could in this instance, is something that if you're in the game, you're just going to stick with it for life, because you can't go back and there's no alternatives to it, at least not yet.
So, totally agree. Got two things. One, I feel like you need to be told right now that you're special.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
And two, I'm like,
Wait, you didn't actually tell
we're
me.
going to
I want to
give
hear
you a
you.
last.
Tell me I'm special.
I did. I said you're
No,
special.
you said, these were your words, you need to be told you're special. That was a statement about what was happening. All right.
Oh, okay. If I could have a picture, I'd hold up the sign that said you're special. And then I'll give you our third word, because I think we're reaching the end today. But our third secret word is apple pie.
I love it. 3 amazing secret words. All right, Doug, that's the pod. Thank you for this amazing conversation. And thank you all for joining us on ABA On Call.
Thanks for watching this episode of ABA On Call. To get your CEU, follow the link and instructions below the video. You can enjoy the program again there, or you can go straight to the attendance verification quiz. Just enter the secret words and pay the CEU fee to generate your certificate.